Welcome back, fellow explorers. Chemical Apes here, and today we're going to be deep diving into the art of ship building. This particular feature has got to be one of the best aspects of Bethesda's Starfield. And if you're like me, who loves to build, then you're probably going to sink a ton of hours into this. So whether you're a seasoned veteran at crafting or just starting out, this full guide will take you step by step through everything you need to know for a streamlined process of building ships. Okay, so in Starfield, ships, they come in all different shapes and sizes, each with its own unique strength and ability. Therefore, it's a good idea to have in mind the type of ship you want to build. So whether your goal is to create a small, speedy recon vessel, or maybe a badass destroyer, or even a craft inspired by your favourite movie or series, the initial step is the same. So to begin with, what you need to do is make your way to a nearby shipyard. These are commonly found at space stations or spaceports, and they're scattered across most planets. Now, upon arrival, you need to seek out a ship technician. These are located within a ship services store. They're pretty much situated close to your point of disembarkment. Just engage in a conversation with them and choose the option, I'd like to view and modify my ships. Just a quick note on that, you can actually build your own landing pad with a ship builder. And the bonus, it will have a ton more parts available. But in any case, you'll then be able to view your ship. If you have more than one, you can simply cycle through them by pressing Q or T. Now just bear in mind this guide, I'm going to reference PC keys, however the process is essentially the same on console. So let's move on. Now at this point, you may want to just replace various parts of the ship, or you could completely start from fresh. Now I want to cover all bases and all points, so I'm going to make this guide doing a complete build of a ship. It's going to be this one shown here. Now, one important thing that you need to bear in mind is that if you want to build a ship from scratch, unfortunately Starfield doesn't give you the option of a blank canvas to build a new ship. Therefore, what you'll need to do is use one of your current ships. Now, sadly, this is going to be overwritten by the new ship that you're going to be building. So with that said, my advice is to buy a really cheap ship or use the one that you don't want, because unfortunately you are going to lose it. It's a feature in Starfield that is really missing, but it is what it is. Okay, so first off, let's dive into the basics. Now from this screen, we simply need to go into Ship Builder by pressing B or the corresponding console keypad. Now before we go massively into the building, I just want to cover all part types, because there are some that are compulsory and some that are optional. And to be honest with you, it is crucial that you have an understanding of each part. So what we need to do is press G, and then we can look at them in this menu. From here, we can pretty much cycle through the part types by pressing Q or T. Now when customizing or building a ship, you'll be shown 13 different ship parts. These are the bay, cargo hold, cockpit, docker, engines, fuel tanks, grav drive, hab, which is short for habitat modules. I'll cover these in detail shortly. Landing gears, reactor, shield generator, weapons, and finally, structures. These are optional and they're purely for cosmetic purposes. Now, based on the parts that are used for your ship, you will have 14 different types of stats. These stats are shown here and they're shown here. First are the bottom ones. Pretty obvious, laser, ballistics, and missiles. These values are the damage that they deal out. Then the hull, which is the ship's health. Then more obvious ones, which are values for shield, cargo, max crew, and top speed. The not so obvious ones, and the crucial ones in my opinion, are these. Mobility, this is a value that determines how well your ship can maneuver when in combat. Then we have jump range, which is the distance, or better put, the light years that we can warp using the grav drive. If you've missed it, you'll see this value when traveling between systems. Then finally, we have mass, which is how heavy the ship is, which in turn affects the mobility, top speed, and jump speed. Now the other 6 stats in the top, I'm going to be covering in a minute. But for now, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete these parts like so. And what this will do is it will give us a blank canvas, as I mentioned earlier. It will also reset all these values to 0. Now in terms of controls, they might differ on console as I mentioned, but like I said, the fundamentals are the same. So what we can do, we can zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. We can rotate the canvas by holding the right mouse button. We can also pan by holding the middle mouse button. And finally, what we can do, if we hold down left control and scroll with the middle mouse, we can change the elevation. That's a little bit of a funny one, but I'll go into that shortly. Okay, so let's kick it off with the core part of the ship. This is the reactor. It's essentially the heart of the ship, and it's going to basically feed power into these 6 areas here. So weapons 1, 2, and 3. These can vary, but it could be lasers, ballistics, and missiles, for example. Then we have the engine, shield, and grav drive. Now, the main point that I really want you to take note of is that each one of these parts in this particular area all have a class attribute. So if we cycle through here, you can see the class rating detailed just there. You can see it for grav drive, you can see it for shield, for engine, and so on, and for any weapon as well. Now, when you decide the class of ship you're going to construct, you need to start off by choosing the reactor class first. This is basically because the class of the reactor sets a limit for the other parts that you're going to be using. So for example, if we look at shields, you can see these have multiple classes, A and B, but because we've got an A-class reactor, we would need to go for an A-class shield. So it's got to be the same class or lower. So one method of adding parts is either by clicking off the current part that's on the screen, so it's not selected, and then adding the part by pressing G. Then click on your part, and choose your part, and it will be stuck to your cursor. So from here, we can just move it around, and then we can click it into place like so. Alternatively, the other way of adding a part is just hover over these markers here, these circular markers, and then just press G to attach. Now, doing it this way allows you to preview the part that you're going to be adding as well. Okay, so let's go ahead and attach a shield. Now for this example, what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose a Class B shield, which is a class above the A-class reactor. Yep, will it work? No, it won't. Now, the way you know this is it will let us attach it, but if you look in the bottom right corner, you'll see an error message in red. So to bring that up, press C for flight check. Now this is going to bring up quite a number of errors initially, but the one that I want you to look at right now is this one here. Ship contains modules that exceed reactor class. So when you come to save it, it won't allow you to do so. So if you're wondering why it's not saving and you do see this message, then you know what it's related to. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to delete these parts, and this will give me a clear workspace. Now from here, I want to talk to you about HABs, short for Habitat Modules. Now these are the core vital parts of the ship, and to be honest with you, in my opinion, what you really need to start with before anything else. Now the good thing with HABs is that they're not class-based, so you can pretty much choose whatever module you fancy. So whilst I scroll down through the HABs, you'll probably notice a few things. The 1x1, 2x1, 3x1 is pretty obvious, it's the size of the HAB. But you may also notice the word Stroud, Hope Tech, etc., etc. These are the brands. And there are a lot of brands in Starfield, but you can mix and match them however you see fit. The other bit you might notice is these little dashes here underneath. This UI basically indicates that there are multiple variants for the brand and HAB size. So for example, if we go into this Nova Galactic one, we can then see here that we can move through the variants. Each type of HAB has its own features. So for example, if we scroll to the workshop, this room contains a weapon workbench, industrial workbench, and suit workbench. Another decent one is a science lab, and this contains a pharmaceutical lab and research lab. And another really good one is the armory. It's got great weapon and armor storage, plus tons of weapon racks and stands. In terms of the other HABs, well, they have a variety of features such as beds, storage, crew stations, and galleys. It is worth exploring each one, but in order to do so, you'll need to build your ship and then test it out. Just bear in mind that each brand has a different interior look, so you can use multiple brands if you need to, but you will need to build your ship to actually preview it. It doesn't actually tell you what it contains. Now, unfortunately, HABs, they are sort of all-in-one type modules, and they come as they are. So changing ladder locations, door locations, furniture locations isn't actually possible. The feature locations are basically dictated by the HAB brand and variant that you're using. So for example, if we zoom in on this HAB here, we can see that these connection markers here indicate possible locations for doors and hatches. But like I said, that's not something you have control of. Now, as you scroll through the list of parts, you'll probably notice at some point that some of the parts are dimmed out. And this is because various parts are reliant on one of the two skills. This could be the piloting skill or the starship design skill. And these are both found within tech. So what you'll need to do is upgrade them to the required level. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to crack on and start building the ship. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to speed it up at certain points and then slow it down at points where I need to talk you through a certain process. But let's kick it off with the hubs. And then I want another 2 hubs on here. Okay, so we've got our hubs now. And then what I want to do is I want to attach a landing bay. Now, landing bay is a crucial part. So we're going to go to this point here, and then we're going to attach. Now, if we just scroll through bays, you can see here different variants. Now, some are quite high and some are quite shallow. Again, there are different snapping points for these. So we're going to attach it there, and then we're going to go probably ship bed. Yeah, that'll do. And then what it's going to do, it's going to elevate it. So if we hover over this landing bay, we can sort of then see this green sort of area here, just underneath. That is the actual floor. Now, we can change elevation at any point by pressing R and F, or left control and then mouse wheel. That's going to come in handy shortly. I'll show you when. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to attach the actual cockpit. Now cockpits, again, you'll be given different options. I'm giving quite a lot of options there, but say for example we did it on top here, just that you'll then be given 2 options. So again, it depends on where you're trying to attach it to. It may not always give you all the options that you want, so it is worth playing around a little bit. Okay, but for now, we're going to attach it to this one here. Now, the other crucial thing is obviously the engines. Now, what I want to do is I'm going to bring these wings out. So I'm going to just then go to these points here. And then I'm going to go to structural. Now, structural is not compulsory. It is optional. This is just to sort of flesh out the ships in their own way. There are a ton of different parts, but again, they're just sort of fillers just to allow you to sculpt the ship. Okay, so that's now placed. What we can also do, if we want to replicate this, we can simply click on it, left control, and then duplicate it by G. That will then just duplicate it, and we can just then switch it on there. We can do the same thing again. We need to, and then again. Okay, I'm going to flesh it out a little bit more before we add on the engines, just with some structures. Now, as you can see, as I've been adding sort of these structures, the mass has sort of been increasing. Again, these structures will tell you the mass on how much they're adding. So although you're going to get a better visually looking ship, it does come at a cost. Now what I'm going to do next is I'm going to add on an engine. So I'm just going to put it on these points here. And let's have a look at the engine. So again, with all the other parts, they're going to be adding on mass. In this case with the engine, it's obviously going to change the speed and in turn the mobility and everything else that's connected to it. So I'm going to go for this 2020 White Dwarf. It's increased the mass, but it's increased the top speed and mobility. Okay, so there is a bit of a trade-off there. You've got to sort of balance it out. But again, you can see here now, we have now got an engine. Okay, so now we've got our first wing, and I want to sort of duplicate this wing and apply it to this side here. So what I can do is I can just hover over it, left control, then click, 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 click. You can see these points are sort of highlighted here. Keep your finger on control and then press G, and then we can basically duplicate it and apply it to that. Now, what we want to do is sort of switch that. So it's sort of a little bit frustrating, but you've got to sort of detach stuff a little bit, and then you can then press Z to flip it. Touch it, left control, click, 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 and then attach like that. Okay, so we're getting somewhere. Now, at any point where you're thinking to yourself, is this ship complete? What else do I need to make it a complete ship? You can refer to these errors here. Again, to bring it up, press C or just click on flight check. And it actually does tell you what you are missing. So we're missing docker, grav drive, landing gear, so on and so forth. So there's quite a few things yet, but it is a good way to reference in terms of what you're missing. Okay, so we're going to close that for now. So now what I think I'm going to do is add in the landing gears. Again, they may differ depending on where you're trying to attach them to, but I'm going to go directly underneath, and there we go. Accept on that one, and as you can see, it is level. So we can see the floor value is the same. Sometimes these landing gears and the bays, they have different heights. So if they don't match, then it will show this in red, this sort of floor here. And it's not compatible, but it will also come up in the errors as well. Okay, and then what we're going to do is we're just going to dupe this. I'm going to pull in some structures just to give it a little bit more of something about it. Okay, so now I've sort of fleshed it out to a certain degree with structures. Now, all these structures, they haven't really added anything other than just the visual look. But what they have done is increase the mass, which isn't great, but it is what it is. So there is a sort of trade-off that you just need to bear in mind. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start adding in the crucial stuff. If you're unsure what to add, you can refer to this here, or you can refer to the errors here. And it will tell you what you need to, what you're missing, what you need to add. Okay, so I'm going to add in a reactor. Now, this is an A-class reactor, therefore we're going to need A-class stuff related to this. So I'm going to go for grav drive now. I think here is a good location. And I'm going to go for that one there. And then what I'm going to do for this one, I'm going to move this here, and then we're missing the docker. Now, the docker is a bit of a strange one. So again, like the other parts, depending on where you want to sort of attach it, it will give you different variants. So say if I wanted to attach it here, for example, let's bring it up. It's going to give me sort of those mods there. And if I wanted to attach it at the top, for example, then it's going to give me basically different types. So if we go to them, Dockers, so it's give me an extra one there. It sort of does fluctuate. So like I said, guys, just try different options. But for this one, I think I'm going to go for that one. Okay, so we're getting close now. We've got one error left. So we just need to flight check. And then all it's coming up with is fuel tank, which is an easy one. So again, work out where you want to attach it. So for this one, I'm going to attach it here. And then this is going to obviously increase mass, reduce mobility, but then add on the fuel that is required. And basically what the fuel tank does increases the distance you can travel via the warp, via the grav drive effectively. Okay, so I'm going to add on that one. Again, guys, you can add on more than one if you wanted to. They do stack. Okay, so now we've just got warnings. There's no errors showing. So let's bring it up. So we're missing a shield, which is optional. And then we're missing weapons, which again are optional. However, they all need to be the same class as the reactor. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to add on some weapons. So I'm going to go to the front here. Now, it's up to you what weapons you take. You don't need to have all three weapons. You don't need a laser, missile, and cannons. You could just use cannons, missiles, or lasers. I like a little bit of variety. So I'm going to go for lasers on the front, I think. Click on that, duplicate it, apply there. I'm going to go missile on the top there. That'll do nicely. Okay, so now what I want to do is I want to add on the cannons. Now, I'm thinking on the side here, just on the side underneath. And let's go ahead and do that. However, if you scroll through, you're thinking, hang on, it's not bringing up the weapons option. It's because some of the weapons can't actually be applied to the sides of hubs, for example. There are a multitude of reasons, but in that case, if you go to structural, and then you've got the sort of weapon mounts here, horizon weapon mount. You apply that, and then you go on the weapon mount itself, and then you can then apply weapons. So I'm just going to add on a cannon, and there we go, guys. So we now have missiles, lasers, cannon. Now, an error has appeared. So if we go into that, unassigned weapon. Ship has weapons that must be assigned to a group. So what does it mean? Well, basically we need to assign these weapons that I've created to these areas here. So if we go to T, weapons, and then we can then assign them. So W0, I don't know why they do it like that, but we can say, right, that's the left click. We want to go flare, laser for that. W1 is a right click, which we're going to go to cannon for that. W2 is the middle click. We're going to go to missile launcher. So they are now assigned. Close that, and it's brought them up in this window. So there's one thing we are missing there. Again, we can refer to it if we need to, and it is a shield. Okay, so now what we've got is pretty much a complete ship. However, there's some stats that I'm not happy with. Mobility is pretty naff. Cargo is naff. So let's address that. Now, with mobility, we can sort of address it by adding on engines. We've already got 2 engines, but there is actually, I don't think there's a limit, not at least to my knowledge anyway. So I'm going to add on some more engines here. Now, again, depending on where you add them, it will give you different options. I did those on the side, so there was a lot more options. These are going on the back. So I'm going to go for this one here. And then I'm going to actually dupe it as well. And there we go, attached it. So now what I've done is I brought up top speed, mobility to 100, top speed, mass is a lot higher, but I'm getting some decent values now. Okay, so there's one value that I'm really not happy with right now. It's this cargo here, 220, rubbish. So let's add on some cargo options. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to just go underneath and I'm going to add on here. Now if we look at the cargo options, they do sort of fluctuate with the cargo value, which is how much weight you can carry, but obviously the mass does impact on that as well. It's entirely up to yourself what you go for. There's a trade-off again. You increase the mass, then you're decreasing the mobility, so on and so forth. So sometimes it's worth playing around with these sort of options and getting the best that suits your sort of style. But for this one, I'm going to go for... I'm actually going to go for the galleon cargo hold. Now, if you wanted to, you could actually have more than one cargo hold. So again, we could just sort of duplicate it and then apply it. I need to flip it first. And then it gets a little bit finicky. And then just apply it to there. We've now got a cargo of 1600 plus, but obviously it's sort of decreased our mobility. So like I said, there is a trade-off. Okay, so now I'm pretty happy with the ship. It's looking pretty decent. We can save it if we want to. But I want to color it. I want to personalize it how I see fit. So the best way to do this is work out what you want to color, and then you can sort of do group coloring if you wanted to. So let's click on the wing, click, 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 and then I'm going to just let go of control and then press J. It will then bring up a color palette, which you can sort of work through. Now, you can obviously just play around with these colors as you want to. You got color 1, color 2, and basically each part has 3 colors. So there's always 3 colors to each part. And then eventually, guys, you will hopefully have a beautiful looking ship, a little bit like this one. Well, that's it from me, guys. Hope you enjoyed the video. Remember to leave a like, subscribe, and comment if it has helped. Remember to check out the playlist just here for more Starfield guides. That's it. Ciao for now.